it's not enough right now with all the hurting people I'm around and broken marriages and things. I just want people to constantly have more buy-in to the kingdom. Whereas it's not like, oh, you're converted, you don't need more buy-in. No, to stay in this for the long haul, you need experience after experience after experience where selfishly it feels about you. You need that moment for sure, at least once, but maybe more.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Anabeth Morgan. Anabeth is a worship pastor and songwriter from Denver, Colorado. This episode is brought to you by Monk Drums. Monk Drums is a creative desert venture that strives to combine beauty and business as one heartbeat. Monk Drums' main focus is handcrafted wooden drums that allow us to love, assist, and serve all who accompany us on this path. Use the coupon code FERMENTPOD to get 5% off your Monk Drums order. Find them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Monk Drums, and every Monday look for hashtag Monk Drum Monday. Speaking from personal experience, Monk Drums are wonderfully crafted and they sound amazing. They blend the best traits of both the djembe and the cajon, and I found them to be incredibly versatile in both the live and studio environment. Check them out at monkdrums.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worship Team comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Jesus Culture, Passion, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. Visit them at worshipteam.com today for a free trial. You can also find them on social media: Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place: worshipteam.com.
Hey everybody, this is Mike O'Brien, director of the Vineyard School of Worship. Our latest single, Be Still, written by my good friend Jason Phillips, is the latest of our monthly singles, available on the first Friday of every month. Jason is the pastor of worship and arts at the Raleigh Vineyard in North Carolina. Be Still features the powerful vocals of Sarah Elmer. Check it out wherever you listen to music.
All right, everybody. Hey, my name is Adam Russell. You are listening to the Ferment podcast. And this afternoon, I'm here with a very good friend. Say hello, Anabeth.
Hello.
We are in Cannon Beach, Oregon.
The most magical place.
So magical. It has been pouring down rain for a day and a half, and the sun finally came out.
Whoop.
We're feeling pretty good about that. And I'll just tell you, Anabeth, I'm really, really excited that you're on the podcast. And I'm just going to tell you straight up front, I kind of maybe want to do something a little different, maybe.
Okay.
I want to really dig into what it means to be a worship pastor with you, because I just think you're such a great worship pastor and such a great worship leader.
Thank you.
Yeah. But before we do that, I think maybe we need to do some groundwork.
Okay.
Lots of people have heard you sing on Vineyard Records. Lots of people have seen you lead at Vineyard conferences and whatnot, but maybe they don't know who you are, where you came from. So maybe you could give us a little synopsis, like who are you and like where did you come from?
I'm just a poor girl from, yeah, it's interesting. I have a twang in my voice because I'm from the Deep South. I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. I have 4 brothers.
Woo.
So I was raised with lots of shenanigans. I'm almost the baby. So my parents were great and they're still great. But my dad was in ministry.
Oh,
when
so you grew up in the church.
I did. I grew up in the church, and my dad he had a secular job at like a warehouse up until I was probably 4, so pretty young. And then I remember he came home and he was like, I want to go to seminary. And my mom was like, well, are you going to work? And he's like, well, I can't go to seminary and work at the same time. So their roles sort of reversed a little bit. And we were really poor, like really, really poor.
Yeah.
And, but my dad just launched into, I think, Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary. And that set him on a trajectory to start into ministry. And so I was raised in church. I came to faith early and it was real. It wasn't like a country club conversion sort of a deal. It was like a encounter.
Listen, this is how crazy I am. I even believe in those.
Well, there you go.
You know, I just think God's that good.
Counts.
Yeah, I think it all counts.
Well, it's funny because if you tell that, people are like, oh, but were you really saved? You're like, no, but I was really saved because I was playing in my bedroom when I was 6. And it was like I was playing with my Barbies. I mean, it was so simple. And all of a sudden I was like aware of love in a way that it felt warm to me. And I wasn't a charismatic. So all of that, I wouldn't have had a grid for that even as a young kid.
You wouldn't have had language for that.
None of it. And so, but I came out of my room crying and my mom said, boys, what have you done to your sister? Because they automatically assumed that they had harassed me because they used to growing up. And I said, no, mommy, Jesus just told me he loves me. And my mom kind of looked and I said, and asked me if I wanted him in my heart. And so the next Sunday I did the deal. You know, you walk down the front with your parents at that age because you're young. Yeah. And then at that church at the time, they took you to a room. They wouldn't let your parents go because they didn't want your parents to influence your answers. So you had to go through this little
oh yeah, the interview.
Yeah. And I was terrified. But I guess I gave the right answers because I got okayed to be baptized.
That's right. You just say yes to everything.
And Jesus.
Yeah. Do you believe in Jesus? Yes.
Yes, right.
Do you think he's God's son? Yes.
Totally.
Did he die for your sins? Yes. Okay, you're baptized.
Well, the big one is if you died tonight, where do you think you'd go?
My gosh, they dangled you over to hell.
Yeah, right. The heaven or hell question.
Wow. Okay.
So anyway, I was kind of raised in all that. But the turmoil of my childhood probably formed me the most, sadly, with a dad that was in ministry but had secret addictions that I didn't know about and my mom didn't know about. And then came to the surface as his addictions got worse. And so it looked like we would be at church on Sunday and then my dad would go to work on Monday, but then not come home. And then my mom would call the cops like, my husband's missing. It started off that way until it was like, it just became he was out binge gambling. He was out binging on something, you know? And
my goodness.
Yeah. And so
okay, I hate to ask, maybe this is too personal, but like how many times did your mom call the cops saying my husband is missing?
Yeah, a lot of times because my mom always was an optimist and wired like me and always was hopeful. Like
that's so painful.
Yeah. She always thought like, honestly, it became a point of like, I hope he had a car wreck because then it means he's not gambling again or he's not, you know?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so it was really weird because we were, for better, for worse, taught to keep it all together. Like your dad could lose his job and then he would be leading at church again. And he wasn't the lead pastor. He wasn't up preaching. He preached some, but he was more of like an executive type role, an associate. And so that kind of stuff kind of formed me.
How old were you when that happened?
The first time?
Or when it was happening?
Yeah, when it was happening.
It sounded like a process there.
It was. The most I remember it happening was as I entered into middle school, like sixth grade-ish.
Wow, those are formative years as well. That's middle school is tough anyway.
Yes. And it was weird because we weren't even allowed to tell, like, you couldn't tell anybody. Yeah. You weren't supposed to tell anybody. And you were like, yeah, I can't tell anybody because all my friends' parents go to the church and they would probably tell their parents. And then it was like, I can't tell. My mom's sworn to secrecy within her family and my dad's an only child. You know, there's just nowhere to turn to tell. And it created angst in me that I dealt with later in life, as I didn't even realize it was there. There was just a level of current anxiety in my childhood that I just existed in and actually still thrived. I was still a great student, all of that. So
it's amazing. Kids are resilient.
Yes.
But you know
goodness.
what? We're all like, we're little recorders. It's like we're recording everything and we're holding it oftentimes in our bodies.
Yes.
I mean, I know that sounds a little woo-woo.
No.
but I'm just that medieval. I believe that. Like you're carrying that like low-grade fever of anxiety for years.
Yes.
Okay. How old were you when you started to deal with that?
I didn't start dealing with that until I was 30.
It's always in the 30s. It's always in the. I have a theory. I've even mentioned this theory on the podcast. I mention it to my church all the time. But like, you turn 30, life gets real. You turn 35, and this is like when people get divorced. This is when people's addictions come to the surface. Mm-hmm. This is when people's anger issues boil over. Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, there's something about that age range. It seems like, we've lived enough life for all of our choices and all of our anxieties and everything that we've carried to have consequence to build up to something that we can see.
Yeah, it's interesting because somebody asked me, why did it just all of a sudden you start dealing with it? Well, because the Lord's really good and he allowed me. I did a whole bunch of stuff in my 20s for the Lord.
Yeah,
and
you did.
It was kind and he showed up and there's beauty in it. But there was a lot of striving in it, striving that I'm like, man, I could have done all those things and felt even more settled in my skin instead of like, I gotta do all this stuff because I don't know what this is on the inside, but it's always quaking on the inside. Deep down there's always something that's like shaking me a little bit and making me, and it's more than just like, I'm doubting myself. Like it's really shaking me. And I go to bed at night going like, did I make everyone happy today? And did I say anything that was bad? And so I had a panic attack on an airplane. Not enough to where they'd stop the plane, but I remember never had a panic attack before. I'm on a plane with Kyle headed to
Kyle's your husband.
Yes, Kyle's my husband. He's wonderful. Headed to vacation in Southern California with friends, and he's dead asleep, and I'm feeling all this anxiety. And I literally, if I could have like bunched the window of the plane out and dove out, I would have, because that's how much panic I felt. And in that moment, I remembered a friend in Denver, I just moved to Denver, saying to me, like, if you just start to feel things bubble up to the surface for you, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but you can reach out to me. And I got on my computer and wrote an email that wouldn't send until I landed, but to that friend, like, I'm having a panic attack and I remember you saying this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to need to talk to you when I get home. Send. And she was the type of person that was faithful, that wouldn't let me back out of it. And that's what kind of set me into dealing with it, literally.
Wow. That
one moment at that time period, and then a community of people that really value your inner health and emotional intelligence and your guts are thick and you have a core enough to make me have to really deal with it.
I hate stories like that because I hate, I really dislike, the fact that people do experience such pain and trauma, but it's grace because you really are dealing with your stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's both. It's terrible and it's good for you, to get free or whatever. Wow. Can I ask one question about that again?
Sure.
Yeah. So did your dad finally get free of that addiction?
So my dad is still not free, but my parents ended up getting a divorce after they had been married over 30 years, so way later. And I had already been married for a little while. And so, my dad's life these days is one of, because he's got the addiction, he's always trying to not give into it.
Yeah.
But he sits in a trailer in Arkansas and lives with his mom and is very low functioning. And so we do have a relationship, we speak, but it's just hard. You've got these people in your life that form you, and we have this great loving father, like in the Lord, and then you have your earthly father. And I've definitely had to walk out that sort of wrestling with the Lord. Like, this isn't the type of father that you are, but this is the type of father I experienced. And, just the real wrestlings of how you accept, receive, and experience love in general.
Yes.
And then you go get married and you have to extend that. And that's where the rubber starts to meet the road. You go, I don't actually know how to give this away, much less receive it. And then there's another layer when you add kids to it. And it just goes from there. You know,
there's nothing like marriage and children to add to our refinement.
Totally.
Yeah.
And free us up. That's the beauty of it. It's not like just because God puts his finger on something, or just because something gets its finger put on it, it's painful. It's easy to go like, that's the devil, get behind me.
Mm-hmm.
So much of my life, I've wanted to believe that because it hurt. But it was really God going like, I want my healing power on that, but it's going to hurt because it's raw and wounded and open, you know? So he's been kind. He's been really, really kind to me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. I know that's a traumatic and painful story, but I'm really, really glad that you told it. Well, the name of this podcast is The Ferment, meaning that things change over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that there are things in you that have changed over time, especially just even from the story that we just heard there. What about like growing up, or what about like coming to faith, or what about your father's addictions or your parents' divorce? What about getting married, having children? What about any of those constellation of things have like led to change in your own life? Or could you name it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the interesting thing is probably because of my dad's addictions and just his double life. It sounds funny, but it made me angry enough against the way that church looked to me as a kid that I was a good girl and I stayed in church, but I was very on the inside. I was saying like, Jesus in the Bible's cool. And it makes sense when I read it. But this whole church thing, as soon as I get to college and on my own, I'm not sure how I feel about being in that whole church thing.
Why do you think that was your, I'm not sure about the church. Why was that your?
Oh, because I'd watched it like, my dad's addictions didn't stay secret, right? They stayed secret until they couldn't any longer because his addiction began. It used to be he could get back in time to show up at church, but over time, long years, it was like, oh crap, Dad's not home and it's Sunday morning. What are we going to do now?
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
So he started self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
And because he just couldn't pull himself away. And so in that decision of going like, I'm not so sure about this church thing and the judgment side of the church, to be honest.
Yeah, just feeling that, experiencing that.
And it being like your whole family's marked for this type of an attitude.
Yeah.
It made it where I went, I'm not so sure about the church. And then again, there was a grace in it that I really loved the life of Jesus and I really did love scripture. And that all came from how I was raised in the church. But it gave me a chance to kind of back up, and then God, by his mercy, re-invited me into the church in what I know is the church now, which is my first church inside of my marriage. I got married young. I was 20. And when we got married, I remember telling my husband, Kyle, he was like, well, we moved to Kansas City, Missouri. He's like, where do you want to go to church? And I was like, I'm not so sure about all this. I know I love Jesus. And then he was like, oh my God. I think he probably thought, oh my gosh, I married a girl that I thought loved Jesus in the church. And what is happening? But he didn't put pressure on me. And if anything, within the first 3 weeks of living there, a lady grabbed me at my work and said, do you know who Jesus is? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, our boss hates Jesus, so don't mention him. You may get fired. And I was like, okay.
Pro tip.
Right. Pro tip. Like, I don't want you to lose your job because you keep talking about Jesus to these patients on accident, because it just gushes out of you sometimes. You can't help it when he's good.
Well, it certainly gushes out of you.
Oh.
You're an extrovert to the extreme.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's true. And so anyway, it was gushing out of me and she warned me. But then she said, do you have a church yet? And I all of the goodness in me couldn't say, well, I'm kind of wrestling with that. I just said, no, not yet. And she's like, you should come visit ours. And I was like, oh, crap. Okay. And then I said, wait a minute, what kind of church is it? And she said, it's this, she didn't even know. It's this non-denominational church called the Vineyard. It just happens to be called the Vineyard. She didn't even know it was like
Amazing.
Part of a larger thing. And I was like, oh, she goes, you want to come this Sunday? And I, again, had no boundaries. I'm like, sure, So I go home. I'm like, Kyle, we have to go to church with this coworker. Who knows what this is going to be like? And he's like, well, babe, we need to find a church. I know you're trying to figure things out, but And I walked into a vineyard in Kansas City and
Was
never.
it Casey North?
It was.
Amazing.
And I had never felt that way before. Like,
What did it feel like?
well, first off, at the front door, there was this man that just was normal looking and greeted us. Well, he ended up being the pastor. Like, it was Fred Heron was just standing at the door saying hey to people. And he was so warm. Like, he was just so, and then I walked into the lobby and there was this like you could cut something in the air. Like, there's something thick in here. And then I walked into the sanctuary and this little young guy, Steve Jones, I didn't know who it was at the time, but he's on stage singing these songs. And I'd never experienced that kind of worship, or at the time, music for me, right? Music. And my husband thought, I'm really losing it, because I just started crying and we sat down. And I remember him like being like, we'd only been married like 2 weeks. He's like, what is happening to you, this girl I'm married to? And then we left and he said, don't worry, honey, we don't ever have to go back there again. And I was like, what? And he's like, you just cried. And I was like, no. Didn't you feel that? And he was like, oh, are those good tears?
That's so sweet.
Yeah. So just, I don't know.
That's such a classic Vineyard story in some ways.
Yes.
Like, how many people or how many times have you heard someone at your church tell you, I showed up, I came to your church.
Yes.
And in the middle of worship, I'm crying, but I don't even know why.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I didn't do music myself at this time. So it wasn't
Really?
like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't grow up doing music. So,
All right. So when did you start playing music?
I started playing music a year later.
Like you just got a guitar that year.
So
Piano. What'd you do?
So I had sang in college at the Baptist Student Union for like
the BSU.
Yes, there you go.
There you go.
2 times maybe. I sang harmonies, and my husband, who I was dating at the time, was like, "You have a beautiful voice." I'm like, "Thanks." I get really uncomfortable when I sing in front of people, and I'm a sports person. I play soccer. I grew up, I made straight A's. I'm going to be a doctor. I did sports so I could pay my way to college, that kind of I was a very logical, responsible girl because my family was so chaotic and I didn't want to end up like that.
Yeah.
And so there was no ministry thought. And I was raised to think that women only had certain roles, very much so.
Yeah.
Like, there wasn't much I could do other than the nursery and a women's ministry. So why would I want to be a part of a church, when there was not much I could do and I was not an administrative secretary type. So all that to say, I fast forward to Kansas City and I'm sitting by the girl that invited me to the church. That's, we just go sit with her. And she just grabbed me. She's like, "Do you do music?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "When you sing by me at church, I have a hard time singing because I just want to shut my eyes and listen to you." And I'm like, "Okay, this is weird." And so she just kept asking, like, "Are you sure you don't want to do music?" No, I don't. I'm like, and then I would look at this time, that church felt huge to me. I was like, well, you would never get on a stage like that. I'd vomit. I know.
Yeah, I'd certainly vomit.
Literally.
Yeah.
I'm like stage fright. Like, I don't know. And so she knew the worship pastor and was like, "This girl." And so I had a message on my phone at work. I'll never forget pulling my friend Amy in and was like, "What did you do?" The worship pastors called and left me a message and asked me if I want to try out for a worship team. I didn't express interest in this. You're the only one that's ever. She was like, "Well, I just couldn't help it." And she was using things like, "I experienced the presence of God." I'm like, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
I had no context.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So this was just all brand new to you.
All of it. All
okay,
at
so
once.
you went and tried out?
Well, yeah, because Kyle, who's like a Holy Spirit barometer in my life now, but at the time didn't even know that either, was like, "Babe, I think you should do it. Like, you're always like scared of this, but it's really good when you have done it a few times and you should just do it." And I was like, and part of me is competitive enough where I'm like, oh, even though I'm scared of this, I'm going to do it scared,
Are you
feisty.
an Enneagram 3?
I'm an Enneagram 2 with a 3 wing. And when I'm stressed, I move towards 8, right? So a little stress in my life makes me feisty.
Yeah, and you're ready to roll.
A little, and I'm kind of mean about it, when it's, I turn into like I'm like the lovey bear, and then stress hits me and I'm a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm married to a 2.
Yeah.
I know.
Right. Heather, hi.
I'm an 8.
Yes, right. Totally. And then in growth, we move towards creativity in 4,
Amen.
That's a good thing. So I love the Enneagram. Anyway, so I did it, and then I vomited in the bathroom.
No, you didn't.
At the church.
Afterwards.
Yeah. And before.
Annabeth, you're hysterical.
No, here's a real thing.
Yeah.
At the Kansas City Vineyard, this is hilarious. A lady pulled me aside 2 months later, because I started to serve just singing harmonies, because I was like, I can barely do that. And said, I want to pray for you. I know you have some sort of bulimic issue. I hear you puking in the bathroom.
No, I'm not going to laugh at that. That's amazing. Are you kidding me?
Not kidding. And my husband was like, oh, you just told her you have stage fright. I was like, yeah, but she was super serious about me having an eating disorder. And I was like,
oh, man.
Oh, no. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. And then Steve Jones and I started, he asked me, because I was his age, we're the same age. He's like, do you want to help me with the college ministry? And I'm like, aren't we like college age people? And he's like, well, sort of, we'll be fine. You can pastor the girls, but he didn't say pastor. You can lead the girls, I'll lead the dudes. Well, then, because I was singing, he's like, why don't you lead some worship here? And I was like, I don't know. I just sing harmonies. It's fine. And he's like, my friend Josh plays guitar really well. He can play it and you can sing. And it literally just kind of just snowballed from there. It just became, and then the beautiful story, the quick one that probably is worth telling is that Christmas, my husband, we were poor.
Yeah, your husband was in med school, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, with my sister-in-law.
That's right.
It's the weirdest story ever.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's the smallest
We didn't even
world
know
ever.
each other.
No.
This is, yes.
I totally forgot about that.
That's totally amazing.
In Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
We were like loosely connected and had no idea. And I'm at a Vineyard Church and you're like being initiated into
the
worship.
vineyard.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I have no, Adam, I didn't even know. This is like epiphany on the podcast.
There we go.
For me. So he takes all this money and collects like, hey, whatever you would buy Annabeth, just give me some money. I want to bless her. And that Christmas we drove home and they found this like thrift store guitar that was like literally falling apart. And he had everybody write letters and the money was in the hole of the guitar. He gave me this gift and it was just really beautiful because my family doesn't really believe at the time, and some still don't, that women should really lead up front in a capacity in church. But in that moment, they gave money to something that I'm called and made for, right? And I just remember sitting in the living room crying my eyes out like, what is this? And Kyle's like, I want you to buy a guitar because I know if you buy one, you're a hard worker and you'll play it. And I think you're meant to lead. When you're up there on stage singing, you might as well be leading us. And then the senior pastor, Fred Heron of that church, had a prophetic moment and didn't tell me for like 8 years that the Lord was like, that's one of the Vineyard's worship leaders. So have her invested in. He like, while I was singing harmonies. And so, Kurt Bartlett and Steve Jones and all these people just invested in me in small ways and big ones, but even just the small, like the opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
and I started this like worship leading journey that I don't know. It just
You
unfolded.
flourished. It's who you are.
Well, thanks.
It really is who you are. I think a lot of people are worship leaders in terms of like they can lead worship or they have some proficiency. But then occasionally I meet people who like they are worship leaders, like vocationally. That's a Dan Wilt word.
Vocationally. How many syllables is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just think that's who you are.
Thanks.
That's amazing. So right there at KC North with Steve Jones.
Yep.
Back in the day. Amazing. All right. Well, here's what I want to do. I want to take a right turn.
Great.
Can we? Can we talk more about like worship leading?
Sure.
Because I think you have some stuff to say.
This is great.
First thing I want to ask you as a worship leader, especially as someone who I think is a worship leader in their soul, what makes you feel alive as a worship leader?
Oh man, a lot of things, but for sure the first, like if I could prioritize them, I think this would be the top. It literally for me is the people. It really is. It's the fact that like any other venue of music is entertaining people. It is always about people, but with worship leading, it's like it's no fun to go somewhere by yourself. It's always
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's just no fun to go like to a party alone. It's not a party without the people. So what makes me come alive in worship leading specifically is showing up to a stage and going, oh my gosh, Lord, you're entrusting these folks to me to lead them to you. What a better like privilege. There's just no greater privilege. And I come alive watching them engage his presence. Some going scared to death, going like, what is it? Right. And they're not responding. So for me, people are like, I just love when the whole room's hands are raised. That's beautiful. But it's even more beautiful when my friend who is so far from Jesus is inching closer to the kingdom, and I get the vantage point of watching it.
Yeah, you maybe see that person sing for the first time.
Ever. Or even like feel, the first time somebody feels something and their eyes kind of like Jovi right now, my 3-year-old. Anytime she hears a noise, she'll go, did you hear that? But her eyes get really big.
Yeah.
You see these moments all the time in rooms of worship. People's eyes get big, or you see them kind of like shudder a little bit. Like, what is happening? Why am I feeling this? Much less sing the songs and go, I'm not even sure I believe this, but I'm willing to try and sing it. And then all the mysteries of like the way that singing words forms it in your heart, all those things, right?
Yeah, it's sharing the moment with a bunch of people.
It is.
Well, what you're saying kind of also reminds me of like when I've married people, when I've been like the officiant at a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I didn't know about those moments is you have the best seat in the house.
Yes.
Like you're like 12 inches from this man and woman, and they're like, maybe you have written their vows or something, and it's the most beautiful thing, and you're the one person who can hear it better than everyone, and it's like such a privilege. It's kind of how worship leading is too, because you're a part of a team, maybe 6 or 7 people standing in front of a few hundred or 1,000, and you're seeing something that no one else in the room is seeing, and you're actually leading it, you're initiating it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what brings me to life the most.
That's what makes you alive.
Yeah. And then the songs, like the beauty of some of the lyric hitting people as well. I mean, it always, again, involves people for me, but just the music itself, the gift that, why is it that when we put music to words, it's so impactful? Like right now I can sing you the preamble of the Constitution because I learned it in a song. Right? Like, we the people in order to form a more perfect union. I can sing the whole thing only because it was attached to music. And maybe that's because I'm naturally musical in my ear.
Yeah.
But I think that's true for everybody.
I do too. I think it's deeper than that. I think there's something about human psychology, human biology, whatever you want to call it. But melody is so sticky.
Yes.
It's an amplifier. Melody amplifies words. It makes them go deeper. It puts things in our heart. And I'm sure there's someone who's listening to this who's like a neuroscientist and could like talk to us about. Tell us, please write to us.
Comment.
Yes, please. If you'll just put it on the Ferment social media, I will read it on the next episode. But there's something about music that's like firing multiple parts of our brain. It's like it's profound. It's God. Can we just say that?
Totally.
It's God.
Amen.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Hey, let me ask you another question. What's a win on a Sunday?
I feel like a win on a Sunday is, it usually involves it's after the service and someone comes up and says, it feels like you chose that song just for me. And I'm reminded again that he really does leave the 99 for the one.
Oh.
And the way I'm reminded of that is a lot of times in my own life, I'm quick to say, there's people with bigger problems than mine, Lord. There's people that have more needs than mine, Lord. Like, not everybody's wired that way, and that's actually not holy. It's immature to be wired that way. Basically, you're saying like, oh, you go and bless and give provision to other people that have more needs than me, Lord. I'm fine. And Lord's like, your needs matter too, right?
Yeah. Meanwhile, both of your legs are broken,
right?
And you're dragging your dangly legs across the floor.
That's right. And because so much of the way I think as a leader, and the more into leading I get, is like, what's going to bless the whole, right? So even as this retreat, if you're leading worship, hopefully you're like, what songs can I sing that most people are going to be able to sing with me? I want to serve everybody. But the fact that I'm thinking that way, and then this person comes up and says, this was for me, God goes, hey, listen, even as you're trying to bless the whole, I want to bless the one as well. Yeah. That is really powerful and breaks my brain all at the same time. And it's a win because that's when people buy in more to the kingdom. When they feel seen by a loving, safe presence, they're bought in more. And not to be like too dark, but it's not enough right now with all the hurting people I'm around and broken marriages and things I just want people to constantly have more buy-in to the kingdom. Whereas it's not like, oh, you're converted. You don't need more buy-in. No, to stay in this for the long haul, you need experience after experience after experience where selfishly it feels about you. I mean, you do. Like, I think you described like being called the beloved, right? Like you need that moment for sure, at least once.
Probably more.
But maybe more.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling that story last night when I was speaking. Like, I got really profoundly touched one time at a super charismatic renewal meeting, like in the floor, and I had a man praying for me start yelling that, you're the beloved of God at me, which is the oddest thing in the world, right?
Totally.
There's a sense in which it's crazy,
Yes,
right? But
crazy.
it landed on me so hard, and I started to believe it, and it changed my life.
Right.
Yeah. Tell you a funnier story about that too. So I had many years where I started to believe like the Bible truth that I was loved by God, and not just in my head, but feel it in my heart. And it is true, right?
Yeah.
And even I started to believe, like really believe that like, that God cared for me and he called me beloved, which is this super tender thing.
Totally.
So I started to believe it. And then one day I'm reading the Bible, and I'm literally reading the Old Testament. I'm reading Genesis, and I'm reading the story of Joseph. And Joseph is his father's favorite son. And it occurred to me, Joseph is his father's favorite son, and he has a special coat that he got from his dad. And all of his brothers beat him up, and they threw him in a hole, and they sold him to Egypt. And then finally, later, many years later, he saves his family.
Totally.
Yay! And then I was like, man, that's a new definition of beloved. And then I realized Jesus is God's favorite son.
Oh, no.
I started waking up to this other aspect of belovedness. And I've been stewing on this for a couple of years. It's like, there's this sense in which you are God's beloved, right? But then I've been awakening to, at least pastorally, maybe what is the price of belovedness? It might mean feeling the affections of God and having more difficulty in your life. I'm sorry to take it serious here all of a sudden. You know what I mean?
This is the real stuff, man.
But the first time that I woke up, I was like laughing and sort of trembling, going, holy crap, no one told me that first,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Here we are.
oh my gosh.
Here we are. Okay, Anabeth.
Yes.
Right along those lines, what keeps you believing and faithful during really hard seasons?
I would say for sure the community around me.
Yeah, talk to me about your community.
Yeah, they're just always quick to ask the deep question, and they're quick to give you, like say feedback, but that's not even the right word. They're quick to reflect. The mirror, we always say community is just the mirror of giving you a reflection back. That's what they should do. And I used to go, yeah.
You just put your hand up when you said
I
that.
did.
Do you guys do that at your church? Can I just reflect, and with a mirror, you just put
I wish we would.
put your hand up. I was like, that's kind of funny.
No, we don't do
now.
that. But can I reflect? You just raise your hand
Yeah,
up.
hey,
Like,
can I
here's a
reflect?
mirror.
It's
It's like talk to the hand, but here's a mirror.
Yeah, the next time I come to Mile High Vineyard, can I
Please.
reflect?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But what I mean in that, it's not like that we walk around critiquing each other like Simon Cowell, right? Like, here's where your voice was pitchy and here's where you screwed this up. It's more like, hey, real quick, is everything okay? I've noticed that you've been quiet in staff meetings and you're usually the one making people laugh. Like, what's going on? And I so appreciate, we have exercises that are rhythmed into our staff calendar. Like every year we do this one where it's basically, you would sit if you were on our staff, and it would be Adam's turn, and each staff member would tell you the most positive way they experience you, like the biggest gift, and then the most negative way they experience you.
Whoosh. In front of everyone?
Drop the mic in front of everyone. Not like all the staff, pastoral staff. So it's a little smaller crew.
Yeah.
You know, like you have the major big staff and then the
Yeah.
smaller.
The custodian isn't there for this meeting.
That's right.
Yeah, but everybody who's like lead pastoring, leading some aspect of the ministry. Yeah.
Yep. And you hope to God.
How vulnerable is that moment?
Oh, well, the first time we did it, we were all like splotchy. It's more actually, you think like, oh gosh, it's my turn. No, it's actually way worse to be giving people negative.
Oh, yeah.
That feels way worse. And it can feel really overwhelming. What usually God's gracious in is there's a theme. So your gift is super like obvious. And then you hope that negative things aren't like 12 different ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're usually not. There's usually a theme to that too. And so, and it's, again, I remember we had a new staff member come on and they were literally like petrified about this. And they're like, I don't see how this is helpful. And there's a lot of defense coming up. Like, it's just hard to get this sort of like feedback or whatever you want to call it. And so this particular person at the end of it started crying and was like, I've never felt so loved and challenged in that way of like, like in marriage, like my spouse makes me want to be a better lover, a better friend, a better parent, a better believer of Jesus by just his very presence and the way that his life reflects Jesus to me. That's what my community does. So when I'm in a tough spot, they're doing these sorts of things, or they've done it in that year. And I'm reminded of it in the season where I'm like, hey, remember this. This is the gift you are. It's not always this is the thing you need to work on. It really is as much the celebration, the positive thing. So they care deeply about your soul. And this idea of you can't lead people to places you're not willing to go yourself. So you can't stand before people and say, you know, you need to love the presence of God and go after God's kingdom and pray for the sick if you're not willing to be doing those things. It's just empty. And so this all comes from that. Jay and Danielle Pathak planted what was, the first Mile High Vineyard Church. And now it's 6 little neighborhood churches. And that's the thread of, they planted it on that thing of like, our souls cannot be sick and survive this. No matter what your talent is, your character has to be greater. No matter what your not biblical knowledge is, your character must be greater, and they've lived it out.
So what I hear in what you're saying is that there's something about the construction of the spiritual family that you have that has forged resilience in you through, in some ways, making you aware of who you really are, the gift that God has given you, the way that you challenge, that's what I'm hearing. It's really beautiful. I hear a community that has not just like loved you and welcomed you by being lovey-dovey, huggy, which I know that they are because they're sweet people.
They are sweet people.
The word that keeps coming to me as you're telling me this is forged, like prepared.
It is like that. I mean, just one really quick thing. Like within the first 6 months of me moving there, this is disorienting, by the way. When you go into a community this way, it feels like, why do I always feel like something on the inside is shaking? Because there's core work being done. It's going deep quickly. And they're not like doing things to you as a project to make you better. It's literally like the love of God is clashing in to this other stuff that you've been carrying a long time. And it's popping to the surface for God to heal. I mean, it's the most intense thing. But I remember in the first, I don't want to say even the first 2 months, there was a leader, a couple, and they led in our church. And apparently they got in a spot where one of the people said, well, then you should just leave. And the amount of people from the staff that rushed to that couple and said, hey, listen, by the way, that's not fair. In marriage, we don't give the back door any authority. The quickness of the response, like you're leading in our church, what's happening in your marriage that this is happening? Just how quick they are to call you out and to go towards it. Much less like right now, a woman in our church has cancer and it's really bad. How quick we've all gone towards sitting in the ER with her for 3 hours, praying healing for her already, like so much that she's like, wow, guys, thank you. I guess keep praying, but wow, I've had so many people at my house trying to pray cancer away in Jesus' name. It's all from this like health place of like being clear in our souls instead of our lives aren't working, we're frantic. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh crap, we forgot to pastor and love people. It's so good to have margin, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Anyway.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a really great answer. And I'm really challenged by that story. I just want to tell you, I'm really challenged. That's such a vulnerable experience.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, what do you need to feel supported? And here's what I'm thinking. You're a worship pastor. What do you need from your pastor to feel supported?
Well, I didn't know I needed this until he did it. And then it was like, oh, gave me so much permission and room. Okay, now I feel like I can do anything. When I first came on staff, within the first 6 months, my pastor grabbed me and he said, hey, listen, I want you when you're leading worship to be so crazy in the Holy Spirit that I have to tell you, wow, now listen, that was weird. Never do that again. And I was like, what? Okay, but I don't ever want to do something that would make you come up and tell me, don't do that again. And he's like, okay, but I'm just telling you, like, that's how much room you have to try things. And at the time I was like, it felt just kind of weird. Like, that feels a little irresponsible. Why would you do that? Then processing like a year later, he said that to me because he knew I was kind of a rule follower, responsible type that would always defer, like, oh, I don't want to extend worship too long because somebody needs to preach, or what about the kids' men? And then, oh, I don't want to, I don't want to be showy. And I had all these insecurities always going off in me. And he was like, I knew if I said this to you, you'd just finally get to the good stuff. It's such a blessing to have a pastor that's willing for you to, what I heard in that was, you can make mistakes though. Like,
yeah, amen.
Like, that's so supportive versus like, hey, only do fast songs. And by the way, I don't like this song. And what's great is, even in the midst of that, he has say. Like, if I do a song and he's like, I didn't love that, it didn't make sense to me, I would listen and probably actually submit because I respect him so much.
Yeah.
But it's really fun when your pastor says, try things,
yes,
make
take
mistakes.
Ground. Try something.
That's right.
I love it.
And it really blessed how I was wired more than I knew. And then the longer I've been leading there, I'm like, oh, this really blesses my gifts to fire in a way that they couldn't in other places or other settings.
I'll just tell you, the churches that I go to that have worship ministry that I feel like is dynamic, filled with like that tangible sense of God's presence, almost always there's a lead pastor somewhere who has created an atmosphere of risk-taking and permission. Like it just kind of doesn't happen any other way. It's not like I haven't been to all the churches in the world.
Right, totally.
I'm not the ultimate authority, but I just know that one of the consistent themes is that kind of feeling that Jay has given you. It's kind of at the root of every church that has something really special in worship.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well,
go Jay.
Yes.
And listen, pastors, listen to that. That's a really good word.
Yeah.
That's a great word. My goodness. All right. I want to ask you another question as it relates to worship ministry. What's the most difficult part of being a worship pastor?
I don't know if it's specific to just worship pastoring. I want it to be, but I think it's pastoring in general. No, it is specific to worship pastoring. Within worship pastoring and leading in general, there's always a sense of, right, like, people have all these expectations of you because you have this pastor title. Like, you're going to make me closer to Jesus. You're going to make me feel this certain way. You're going to make me feel that certain way. And that's usually like across the board, all leaders, people looking up to their leaders. So, okay. But it gets weirder when on the staff within that, it's almost like every other staff member, like, your kid's pastor, you're not on purpose, but they're looking at the worship pastor going like, you're going to create this grand experience for me to get all the feel. I want to have the goosebumps, and I want to be weeping on the floor, and what happens to me, and it may be me, but for me, it can feel like a lot of pressure. Like,
how have you dealt with that?
Well, the minute that happens, it's not just dealing with it. It's more like I get debilitated. Like, I can't put a set list together because I'm worried it's not going to be the right song to do the thing. And
so you feel paralyzed.
I do, because it's too much responsibility. That's actually not my responsibility. And so I have to do the work of like, okay, wait, like when a pastor uses language like, hey, worship is supposed to create momentum in the room.
It's a problem.
I don't know if that's actually the goal of worship, to create momentum. What does momentum do for you? Does that mean
Well, what do we mean by momentum?
right?
Either,
Does that
right?
create you mean they're awake to hear your sermon? That's like that old school thought of this is a warm up before the real thing, right? Okay, that's one thing. But also what does an experience with God look like? I don't know for you, but Monday through Saturday when I'm having experiences with God, they look very different. And it speaks to this bigger thing, and we could go on a tangent about YouTube experiences of worship,
Of course.
right, all that stuff. My point is, it can get really weary when it's coming from leadership around you, even not just from, it's easy to say oh, how the people are at the church, they're complaining again. And the staff all goes, yeah, I know. But on staff, they're saying some of the same things, right? And that hasn't happened a ton, but it has, where it's hey.
I think part of what you're putting your finger on is there's this legitimate ache in people's hearts for a connection with God.
Yes.
And there's a legitimate ache in people's hearts for what we might call transcendence. I want to have an experience with God, and I was made for something. Yeah, I was even made for something transcendent.
Mm.
I've had those experiences. You have too,
Yeah.
And at the same time, there was real wisdom in what you said. The Monday through Saturday, the Monday following might be a really different sort of experience with the same God.
Mm-hmm.
And so people don't know how to ratify that or rationalize that.
Yeah.
It can create a lot of pressure, right?
Yes. Yes. And I don't know if maybe some people are aware of that, but I don't think they are to the degree, because we do this thing with staff reports, and what you're aware of is because of what you do is so upfront in a Sunday experience, or even at a worship night or whatever, it's being critiqued. Worship was great this week. I loved the songs, and I felt this and I felt that. There's a lot of areas of the church that don't have that same sort of critique, right? And you're going to get that from people no matter what.
Yeah, the greeters were terrible this week.
Right. Have you ever had people really point that out?
Put that in the letterbox in the back.
Right.
Greeting was awesome this week.
Right. Or ooh, the muffins tasted delicious in the cafe.
Yeah. And the temperature was right.
Right. But when people in their top list of why they left a church, it's well, I didn't connect with the worship as much as the preaching. The preaching has the same sort of pressure on it, right?
Yeah, of course.
But these are the two major things, right? And that can really start to wear on your soul if you're not keeping a clear conscience of what do I know in tasting God's presence in my own life? Like I said, Monday through Saturday, that carries over to the Sunday thing that I have to trust is enough.
Worship and preaching, they're supposed to be acts of communal worship, and they can become very quickly consumables.
Yes.
Or products, and that's really, really difficult. And you just mentioned YouTube a moment ago, the YouTubeification of worship is that it can be a blessing, because people can experience God and see worship and even enter into worship at home or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to understand that everything that's on YouTube has been highly curated, meaning that nothing that's off-putting is up there. No one's bad moment in worship, for the most part, gets put on YouTube,
Nope.
If there's a bad moment on YouTube, it might just be a meme where somebody was making fun of themselves,
Yeah.
And there is an inherent pressure in there.
Yeah.
I feel it. I mean, the truth is, every single Sunday, every single person who comes to my church in Vineyard Campbellsville could stay in bed, make bacon, and make some coffee, and listen to a better preacher than me. That's true 365 days a year. So we have to dig down to what are the real reasons why we might be a part of the church.
Mm-hmm.
What's the real reason for joining the community of God?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we really come to sing?
Mm-hmm.
That's I think this is the real work of worship pastor and pastor.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because you're right. Our largest church in our city offers a service all the time because you can live stream it and you can play it after the fact. So my favorite is oh yeah, I was tired. So I did church on Sunday night from my bed. Oh, tell me how that was. Because I don't want to just say it's all bad. You don't throw the whole thing out. It's not all bad. Some people back in the day put their hand on their television and said the sinner's prayer, and that
had their lives changed.
That's right. And I have a mentor that's literally how he came to faith, so I don't want to just downplay all that, but there is something about the joining of people coming together to do the work of worship together and to look eye to eye. That's why, the singing in the round thing is so fun, because it's very rare that you're actually looking into someone else's eyes other than that one worship leader, and you don't usually stare at them. But to look at each other and sing to one another, not just to God and about God, but I'm singing this to you. I'm going, hey, wake up.
Yeah.
Blessed be the name of the Lord, right?
Yeah, of course.
Adam,
Amen.
and that's powerful.
Right now, even at our church, we're all in the round.
Okay.
We do that every February.
Yeah.
So it's great because the first week everyone comes in, everyone's freaked out,
Yeah, it's
and then
uncomfortable.
the second week everybody leans in.
Yeah.
But it does bring the question, like, what is church for?
Yeah.
What is church for? Great question.
Mm-hmm.
Anabeth, you've done so good. You've done so
thanks.
good. Hey, I want to ask you one more question. This is a question everybody gets on this podcast. Could you just tell me a moment you experienced great joy?
Oh man, there's so many, which is a good thing. I'll do a recent one.
Great.
So recently, a friend of mine, they basically, got pregnant, not planned, and they had.
Those are always great.
Right. Well, not only that, but they already their only other child is already past 10, so huge age gap between, and the whole pregnancy is wrestled with like dreams. What am I going to do now? Is all those real wrestlings, right? And I had a baby just 5 months ago, and he is pure joy to me. So that's the easy answer. Miles is my moment of joy recently, for sure, over and over again, because he is he's so beautiful. I'm just so overjoyed to have this beautiful new son. But a really fresh one was, leading up to this, there's so much angst, and the daughter was even upset about all this stuff. The whole family system's changing, right? And this couple gives birth to this healthy baby, and going to see them for the first time with my own newish baby that I had planned to have, that I was experiencing so much joy for, into this moment of like, here you go, this unplanned adventure in front of you. And these people are new to faith. Like, there's so much stuff, right? Coming into the home, and the 11-year-old is just over top of this tiny peanut newborn. Like he was like 5 pounds when he was born, tiny. And she looks up, I come in the front door, and she looks up at me and she says, "This is my brother.
Yeah.
He's perfect."
Yeah.
I didn't know it could be like this. And see, what I forgot to say is she had been meeting with me for the first 4 months of her mom and dad's finding out, because she was so mad, and they were like, she'll process with you. Would you just be a person? This moment of the literal shift of this is going to be terrible. Yes.
Oh, no.
The kid, the 11-year-old kid, right? Just to be like, my parents didn't tell me the truth. Yeah, she was so mad and couldn't understand. And then this complete shift. I walk in the door and she's like, this is perfect. And I don't even understand. I didn't know the goodness. And I remember feeling like all the feels, because here I am holding my own infant, right? So it's still fresh to me. And I have sat in moments with this little girl who thinks her world is ending because her parents are adding a child, and they lied to her because they weren't going to have any more kids, and she's going to be forgotten. All this pain, right? And then it's here, and not only is it not pain, but this little girl, and it's the baby's
a moment of joy.
Oh, it's like no other. You're just like, God, you really do make all things new and changed in a moment, and I'm so grateful, And then just on top of that, the parents, they're just so alive. They didn't know it was going to be such a gift, and it's just started. And sure, they'll have all the things, right? All the parenting years to come. But this is pure joy for them right now. And because I've just had my own kid, it's all fresh, and I'm aware of it. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Hey, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's just
You're
so
such
fun.
a joy. You're one of my favorite people. You're just such a gift to our movement. And listen, if you don't know Anabeth, you should check out her music. There are smatterings Smattering?
Smatterings.
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 Smatterings
Like-
of music.
Yes, smatterings. But I like smatherings.
Yeah, I've just made up a word. You can check her music out on Spotify. She has a record called A Place for Glory Dwells. Why don't you go and stream it? Why don't you stream it over and over? All right, everybody. See you later.
Hey, everybody, this is Casey Corum, the producer of the Ferment podcast. Thanks for listening. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, on Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and on Twitter at FermentCast. All right, people, see you next time.